Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 4, Episode 8, Irving the Explainer, written by David Chase and directed by James Coburn. Yes, that James Coburn, who was a friend of Garner's and appeared with him in 2 films before this episode. This was the only thing that Coburn directed, other than some second unit work on Convoy. So it's possible he was taking an interest and called up his pal for a favour, but didn't take it any further. The episode begins with Jim turning up at the house of Karen Hall with the prospect of work, while we're shown that their conversation is being bugged. She's writing a book about the 30s and 40s film director Alva Cooper, who was also a Nazi sympathiser, and wants Jim to track down Cooper's old Hollywood colleagues. Meanwhile, their conversation is being overheard by 2 Frenchmen. While there's nothing about this intro that gives us too much to go on, the addition of eavesdroppers and Nazism means we can be sure that Karen is being less than honest about her intentions. But as we've got nothing else to go on at this point, we can't be sure if she's pro or anti-Hitler. Jim works his way through the list of Cooper's friends. Irving Patrick, now a gallery owner, has gone to England, but he has more luck with Julius Buddy Richards, played by our Columbo connection Paul Stewart. He still works in film, after a fashion, but as soon as he finds out what it's for, he wants no part.
I wouldn't give an interview about that monster for all the tea in China. Now get out.
Blaming Cooper for a series of deaths, as well as stealing Richard's ideas and having numerous affairs with teenage girls. He does reveal that there's no way that Cooper would have burned his old films as Hall had suggested, as his ego was too big. He also reveals that Cooper wasn't just a Nazi sympathiser, but was actually good friends with Hermann Goering.
The Reichsmarshal of Germany, Goering?
Even spending time at Goering's summer home, Karen Hall, which gives Jim a puzzle piece he didn't know he was looking for and is a little shaken by. In an unusual move for the series, we then get an opening title sequence over World War II footage, with the suggestion being that it may have been shot by Cooper. We return to Jim breaking into Karen Hall's hotel room, finding it in disarray, before he's being held at gunpoint by a couple of Germans.
Yeah, what did Karen Hall tell you about the Watto?
They are looking for something called the Watto.
The what?
Which he is clueless about, and he's forced to make his escape. He finds that Hall has cleared out, and Richards has been shot by the 2 Germans. Jim calls an ambulance, and Richards starts to tell Jim about his history with Cooper. Watteau was a French artist whose painting may have been owned by Cooper, but he's more fixed on how Cooper's wife was murdered, and Cooper blamed an actor she was having an affair with, Patrick Parnell, while the police blamed Raul Sanchez, who was gunned down while making a run for it. Jim tries to dig up some more info from Dennis, who is just confused by the whole story, and to be honest, at this point so was I. It's a very complicated situation that started simply enough, but as we've been thrown so many character names and characters by this point, the Nazi angle seemingly going nowhere, that I was feeling a bit lost. Thankfully, I think the writer, David Chase, was fully aware of this, and so has Dennis stand in for us, as Jim lays out his theory on what's going on.
Richards was the actual murderer of Olivia Corper. Why? He was in love. What Buddy Richards didn't know was that her lover, Patrick Parnell, has been alive all this time. These 2 German creeps. They're working for Patrick Parnell.
However, Jim is also completely confused.
Boy, it's a mess, isn't it?
Sort of intimating to us that we need not worry about any of it. Just watch and enjoy.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself.
Jim is followed by the Frenchmen, but manages to turn the tables and finds out that they are actually French police, taking them all to Lieutenant Chapman.
So, Chief Inspector, Inspector Mage, how can we help you?
There they are able to explain that the Watteau painting was stolen from the Louvre by the Nazis, blaming it on the Jews, when it had actually been given directly to Goering, who then sent it on to Corper. They believe it was then taken by Corper's housekeeper at his behest, who also took Corper's daughter with her, Catherine Corper, also known as Karen Hall.
Oh, now I get it.
Those are the facts, and the murder of Corper's wife may have nothing to do with it. In fact, nothing else may have anything to do with anything at all, or it may all be relevant. But with the introduction of Rocky to the episode, and an assistant for Jim, Daphne Ishawahara, it feels like David Chase is making it complicated on purpose. Jim starts searching Corper's old properties and finds his daughter prowling about his old mansion. She has been looking for the painting all along too, and claims she's only just discovered who her father and mother really were, and that as far as she was concerned, her real name was Karen Hall. Just to complicate things even further, they are being watched by a new player, who recognises her as Corper's daughter. Unfortunately, that evening, Jim is visited by the two Germans and is forced to take them to one of two burial plots that Corper owned, and in a potential hiding place for the painting. But discover that Buddy Richards was right. Corper had actually hid his film negatives there. Luckily, Jim had this all planned out, and Dennis arrives with Karen and the French police to have the Germans arrested. The next day at Rocky's, with the painting still left undiscovered, Jim thinks he's figured out the murder, that it was committed by Raul Sanchez's younger brother Julio, which is why Raul ran, but is interrupted by a man having a heart attack on Rocky's front lawn, the man who was watching Jim and Karen at the mansion, Irving Patrick. He'd planned to kill Karen, sure that she had seen him murder her mother. He knew Mrs. Corper and her lover, Patrick Parnell, planned to run away together with the painting. So Irving Patrick killed Mrs. Corper to steal the painting, but Corper never had the painting. It had already been stolen by the man who was supposed to courier it to him. Not only that, but Corper faked his own death, putting Patrick Parnell in his place. He actually died a year before our story started, having confessed everything to Irving.
All right, I'll call Dennis Becker. But Irving, you're going to have to do the explaining.
Well, what can I say about this episode? It has murder, Nazis, people pretending to be other people who turn out to actually be the people we thought they were pretending to be, stolen paintings that turn out to not be stolen by the people we think stolen, but by somebody else, a fake death, faked destruction of films, spies, lies, and surprise after surprise. It also has the most confusing plot, not just for the show, but possibly in all of television. One that makes less sense as it goes on. I can understand why poor James Coburn never directed again after this. They should have got David Lynch in for this one. It's essentially a complete mess from start to finish, where the murder turns out to be a red herring for a stolen painting, which turns out to be a red herring for a murder. And yet, I loved it.
Boy, it's a mess, isn't it?
It's a caper episode disguised as a serious pop detective story, and tells you that the whole way through, from even the title of the episode, with Jim basically telling you not to worry about the plot halfway through, and reminding you again at the end. It's a deconstruction of film noir, detective novel tropes that hold a mirror up to how overly complicated some of them got as the genre continued, that says how silly they could be and once you understand that, it becomes far more enjoyable. I can imagine that lots of people hate this episode because it's so overly complicated, even though they explain the whole thing at the end, because you're not supposed to do that in storytelling. But I really enjoyed it. The only thing about it that I feel lets it down is the death of Buddy Richards at the hands of the Germans. I feel like it's a tonal shift that doesn't really work when the rest of the episode is about historical crimes, and it doesn't really do anything for the story. Richards didn't know anything useful that he hadn't already told Jim, and was the only character who really did nothing wrong. So for me that was a tonal shift too far, especially when it would have been so easy to have him survive. For that reason, it's a 4 out of 5 from me. Thank you. Goodbye.